gastritis can be caused by alcohol and tobacco. Alcohol and tobacco can cause erosive gastritis. I thought alcohol and tobacco caused ulcers. I know, but they don't. No, I thought alcohol and tobacco caused ulcers. Well, you know, I used to think a lot of things, but they're not true either. Well, I thought alcohol and tobacco delay healing of ulcers. Alcohol and tobacco delay healing. They don't cause it. What do they both have in common? Non-steroidals. Non-steroidals will cause ulcer disease and gastritis. Okay? Crohn's disease will cause ulcer disease, gastritis, head trauma, stress. And I don't mean stress like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Is she going to call? Is he going to call? Stress like head trauma, like mechanical ventilators. Ventilators, mechanical ventilators. Head trauma, burns. Cushing's and Curling's ulcers. Intubation, head trauma, burns, which is Cushing's and Curling's ulcers. Non-steroidals, Helicobacter pylori, Crohn's disease, and Zollinger-Ellison syndrome. That's what causes ulcer disease. Throw in alcohol and tobacco for the gastritis, and throw in B12 deficiency for the gastritis, and that's what's different. Alcohol and tobacco cause you to have delayed healing. They don't cause the ulcer. Non-steroidals equals death. Non-steroidals equals death. Here's our friend, the gastric mucosa. There's our parietal cell, chief cells. Here's the gastric mucosa. Now, how is it that the pH of the gastric lumen, is 1 to 2? The pH is 2, but the pH here at the lining is 7.4. How is that pH there 7, but in the gastric lumen it's 2? And the answer is, it's good and it's normal to be a little mucousy. I don't find it disgusting. I think it's normal. It's normal to have a little mucus there. What makes the mucus? Why is the inside of your stomach like the fiery pits of hell? Why is it that the stuff that comes out of your parietal cell has a pH of 0.8? Of the stuff that comes out like the dragon's fire melting through? That pH of 8.8? What is it? It's good to have a little mucus. And what causes your goblet cells and the other cells that make mucus there, the mucin-secreting cells, to ejaculate their mucus load onto you? Prostaglandins. Prostaglandins. Food comes in. Gastrin is released. Food comes in. Mucus is released. Why? Because the major stimulant to both mucus secretion and the major stimulant to both mucus secretion and the major stimulant to gastrin release, the major stimulant to both mucus secretion and gastrin release, making the parietal cells form acid, the major stimulant to gastrin release as well as mucus is it the vagus? No, the vagus does cause secretion. Is it acetylcholine? No, acetylcholine does work also to directly stimulate that parietal cell. Acetylcholine also. Is it histamine? No, but histamine causes that parietal cell to work. Gastrin causes that parietal cell to work. Acetylcholine, which is also to say the vagus, the gastrin, the histamine. And the winner for number one stimulant for acid secretion, gastrin, and mucus is stretch, distension. Crispy chicken. Stretch. Ding, 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 ding. Gastrin release. Gastrin gets released in response to stretch is the number one thing. Stretch, which is to say gastrin. Acetylcholine and vagal stimulation. There is a peptide that causes the release of gastrin. You know, what's the name of that peptide that releases gastrin? The gastrin-releasing peptide, what's that called? What's it called? Gastrin-releasing peptide. The peptide, the amino acid, the protein that releases gastrin. Do you remember what the name of that was? The gastrin-releasing peptide? It's called gastrin-releasing peptide. Gastrin-releasing peptide is the peptide that releases gastrin. Peptin-releasing gastrin, peptide that releases gastrin, gastrin-releasing peptide from the vagus nerve. Stretch and amino acids. But the single greatest stimulant for both the mucus secretion as well as the gastrin secretion is the stretch of the stomach. So it does both things. It makes acid and protects the gastric lining. What inhibits the prostaglandins? Non-steroidals. Why do non-steroidals cause ulcers? Why have non-steroidals assassinated more Americans than almost any? The following portion has been edited due to social inappropriateness. Why have they resulted in more deaths of Americans than any form of the following has been removed due to social inappropriateness? That's because non-steroidals are legal drugs. And between overdoses and suicides of acetaminophen, overdoses of aspirin and suicides, and GI bleeding, non-steroidals is public enemy number one in terms of death from drugs. It's not illegal drugs that kill most people. It's non-steroidals. Report that to the Justice Department right away. Okay? John Ashcroft is looking for a job. Tell him to go chase the non-steroidal manufacturers. Okay. That's the biggest thing. Non-steroidals remove this mucus barrier. And non-steroidals put that pH of 2 and non-steroidals make it. So we are now making a crispy chicken sandwich out of your own gastric lining. How's that go with ketchup and little lettuce and tomato? So therefore, non-steroidals cause ulcers, burns, head traumas, ventilators. What are the indications for stress ulcer prophylaxis? Steroids. No. The drug rep brought me a pizza. No. Alcohol. No. Being in the ICU. No. Being in the ICU is not an indication for stress ulcer prophylaxis. It's being intubated in the ICU, not being in the ICU. I've been in an ICU a lot of times. I didn't need stress ulcer prophylaxis. What's the indications for stress ulcer prophylaxis? Let's do this as a whole new section. Indications for stress ulcer prophylaxis. Stress ulcer prophylaxis. It's not the person who's just in the ICU for myocardial infarction. It's not the person who's in the ICU just for DKA. It's not steroid use. No. People who go on prednisone don't need to be on proton pump inhibitors just because they're on prednisone, just because they're in ICU, just because they're having a heart attack and are in a CCU. The indications for stress ulcer prophylaxis are ventilators, head trauma, Crohn's disease, non-steroidals, burns. Non-steroidals by itself, no, but burns, ventilators. The major indication for stress ulcer prophylaxis are ventilators, head trauma, burns, or severe coagulopathy combined with sepsis. Sepsis and coagulopathy. Coagulopathy, I got a high PT. I got low platelets. Sepsis and coagulopathy. I got a high PT. I got low platelets. Sepsis and coagulopathy. I have epigastric pain. What is it most likely? Non-ulcer dyspepsia. I have epigastric pain. How do I diagnose non-ulcer dyspepsia? I scoped you and I didn't find it. How do I tell the difference between gastritis, duodenal ulcer, and gastric ulcer without endoscopy? You can't. How do I treat gastritis? I treat gastritis the same way as I would ulcer disease. You treat it the same way as you would either gastritis and duodenal ulcer disease or gastric ulcer disease, except gastritis does not cause you to have cancer. So gastritis is tested and treated the same way. You also treat Helicobacter pylori the same way. You treat it the same way. A proton pump inhibitor, clarithromycin, and amoxicillin. It's treated the same way. Now, it's treated the same way as those others.